both on?
Oh, I think my mic's on. Thank you, everybody. I'd like to welcome everyone to the City of St. Helena regular City Council meeting, Tuesday, February 11th, 2020. And I've asked our Police Chief Hartley to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Stand, please pledge, and join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And if we could have the roll call, please.
Mayor Ellsworth?
Here.
Vice Mayor Doring?
I'm here.
Councilmember Koberstein?
Here.
Shuto?
Here.
Knudsen?
Present.
And so I'm going to make an announcement that item 10.1, which is the item on the Spring Street bicycle lane issue, is going to be heard at a later meeting. It will not be on tonight's calendar. So if anybody is here for that, I just want to make you aware that it will not be heard tonight. And with that, we will now move to the public forum. This is an opportunity for members of the public to speak on matters of municipal concern that are not on tonight's agenda. Each person's comments shall be limited to 4 minutes, and each person is entitled to speak excuse me, on any non-agendized item only once at any meeting. Brief questions by council members for clarifications may be posed and answered, and council members may make requests that items be placed on future agendas, but in accordance with state law, no substantive discussion or action may take place unless and until the matter properly appears on the agenda. Is there any public comment at this point? Yes, please come up to the podium.
Hi, my name's Ron Rosenbrand, and I am here to talk about the treatment plant project. And first, I want to thank Erica and Curtis and Eric for meeting with us to take a look at it. We're the neighbors of the treatment plant to the west of the treatment plant, and they have since made a new drawing for a new movement of the new bioreactor conductors, or what? Yeah, and it wasn't moved very far, and I just want to express my concern that the noise issue still could be. We just haven't been clarified as to how much noise there's going to be from these machines, and wanted to express our concern about that. They gave us a lot of confidence that there wasn't going to be a smell issue or a contamination problem for our well, but the noise issue still is very concerning to us. So I just wanted to express that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll have an update on the wastewater treatment plant when we get to that report. Is there any other public comment at this point? Please come up to the podium.
My name is Arlene Corsetti, 1401 Spring Street. This is an issue I'd just like address maybe at a future time. I did read the CAFR. I know most people don't, but I did read it. And I'm still a little bit confused about I know that the water enterprise has to run separately than the city. And I'm a little bit confused as to whether the existing bonds and the rates anticipate the wastewater treatment rehab, Bell Canyon, and all of York Creek. I don't expect an answer right now, but I would like that addressed. I saw that there were bonds from 2012 and some water rates, but does that include everything the city now knows about those 3 projects? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any additional public comment? Seeing none, I will close the public comment, and now we will move on to presentations and public recognitions. Seeing none, I will move to staff briefing, item 7.1. This is Upper York Creek Dam Project by Ms. Smithies, our Public Works Director.
We need to go back to number 5.
I'm sorry. So we'll do reports by staff and city council. I will start with our city attorney.
No report.
No reports. Our city manager?
Just want to report that I attended the League of California Cities City Managers Conference last week, Wednesday through mid-Friday, and this year the event was hosted in Napa.
Thank you. Our finance director?
Just want to again. Is my microphone on? There you go. Just another reminder about the bi-monthly billing transition. We are in the process of doing that. So residents would have received their final billing under the old cycle mid-January. So the next set of bills that will be coming everyone's way will be mid-March.
Thank you. Our city clerk? Yeah. Our planning department?
Yeah, we have our 2019 building department statistics we'll be sharing. We had 101 million in revenue for gross building valuations. So we'll be sharing the full report with, I'll be sending it to the city manager.
Thank you. Our public works department?
Nothing to report. Thank you.
Mr. Knudsen? Ms. Chateau?
Yes, I just wanted to mention that I thank my council members so much for the heavy lifting you did at the last council meeting when I was at the Napa First to Five leadership training that I'm doing that focuses on how do you do change in Napa County for benefiting the lives of children and families. I was there today, but when I was reviewing the tapes from last meeting, I was struck at all of the work that you guys did, and I wanted to thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Koberstein?
Nothing.
Mr. Doring?
Yes. I attended, on behalf of the city of St. Helena, the Association of Bay Area Government Special General Assembly in San Francisco on Friday. It was an all-day event. I have some notes here because the language that they use is a foreign language to me, so bear with me. I want to give a brief review of some of the high points of this special assembly. There was a robust discussion with Senators Bell and Senator Weiner and Assemblymember Chu on the state of housing in our nine counties in the Bay Area. Some of the things that were talked about by these representatives in the legislature are the need for ongoing funding supply. Ideas around that included reforming Proposition 13, potentially reducing the mortgage interest deduction, need for increased supply of housing at all levels of affordability, including market rate. In general, you'll hear this more and more. There's a focus on preservation, production, and protection of tenants in the tenant area, especially in rents and evictions. Healthy debate, as expected, and has gone on nearly every meeting I've gone to at ABAG is state-mandated housing versus preservation of local control. They continue to have this battle, and there was, it was a pretty strong conversation with local electeds and state representatives at this meeting. At the business meeting, the Assembly approved a budget amendment to accept a $23.7 million grant from the state's Regional Early Action Planning Grants, REAP. In addition, the local jurisdictions will be receiving $25.5 million. That translates to about $65,000 for the city of St. Helena. These funds will be used to help implement the sixth cycle of the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, which runs from 2022 to 2030. ABAG will be requesting an immediate $5.9 million to develop the RENA methodology, provide technical assistance to local jurisdictions for the next cycle, and allocate funds for local jurisdictions to support housing planning and acceleration of housing production. Essentially, there are three pots of money available to support housing planning and production. SB2, which this city has already taken advantage of. There are additional technical assistance funds available in that program. The local early action planning grants, LEAP. Note that the application process, note to staff, the application process is July 1st, so that's coming up. Staff should be monitoring HCD's Notice of Funding Availability, NOFA, on the HCD website because it's on there now, and it's actually an interesting area to look at for funding opportunities. There was a strong emphasis that local planning staff are encouraged to start the RENA planning process and housing element review right now. The process could very well require rezoning of properties to higher densities or by right housing designations. RENA rule changes will require much more realistic site identification for affordable housing. There will be greatly expanded oversight by HCD. With regard to the new allocations, there will be an emphasis on social equity, jobs, housing balance, and reduction in greenhouse gases. We may not be able to use our existing identified sites without certain minimum densities or potentially by right zoning designations. More narrow definition of what a vacant land site is. Likely, we may not be able to use sites smaller than a half acre or greater than 10 acres without substantial evidence that these are realistic sites for housing. There will very likely be significantly higher allocation for each jurisdiction, potentially up to 3 times our current allocation. And finally, prior performance may affect future RENA allocations. Again, all of this is developing process. Everything I've stated basically is sort of nebulous and to be worked out, but I'm kind of giving that's the sort of the rough plan of what's going on the RENA level at ABAG. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Doring. Thank you for participating in that. I have a few things. I want to remind folks, and I think the power shut off this weekend reminded us all that we need to be vigilant, continue to be vigilant in our preparedness as we move towards perhaps drier weather, making sure we have our go bags and our plans ready, and just work on our preparedness, and that'll be a continuing message here. I want to quickly talk about Club 25. That's where we drive the recommended speed limit of 25 to keep our streets safer for pedestrians and bicyclists. I want to mention that the Fiscal Intertribal Council will be presenting a series of meetings at Grace Episcopal Church February 17th through June 15th. It's a once monthly cohort talking about Native American historical trauma and traditional healing. This will focus on understanding the accurate history of Native Americans in Napa County, explaining the historical trauma, and show how California natives are still present, active, and involved in the modern world. So this will begin February 17th, 6 p.m. at Grace Episcopal Church. It's a series of workshops, and pre-registration is encouraged. You can find out information at Grace Church or through the Fiscal Intertribal Council at 707-256-3561. And then finally, this time of year, with Valentine's coming, I like to sort of talk about my secret crush on the city of St. Helena. And I have a card from a secret admirer to the city of St. Helena that I'm going to send to our interim City Hall address of 1572 Railroad Avenue, St. Helena. And anybody else that has that is a secret admirer, please send a Valentine. So with that, we'll move into our staff briefings. Go back, presentations and public recognition, seeing none. We'll move into item 7.1 of our staff briefing. This is Upper York Creek Dam with Ms. Smithies.
Thank you. I'd like to update. I believe I updated last time the tree limbing was completed. It also came in $20,000 under budget, so that's good news. And the permit applications were submitted back in January with 65% design documents. And comments weren't due back until February 23rd. We got 2 sets of comments within a week. And we just received the Water Quality Control Board's comments this morning. So they're making this a priority, which is good news. So we'll give them back their comments and hopefully get some action here in the end of February or at least by in March so we can get out to bid in April. The 10 qualification packages that were received, they're still being reviewed. The good news is it looks like almost all of them majority of them will be approved. We're just considering one. There's 2 that we're still looking at. We scanned documents, so not all of them got scanned correctly. So the consultant has 2 additional documents to read this evening, but hopefully have an update. We'll post the selected consultants that met the pre-qualifications in the next week because we get a lot of calls. People are very interested in doing this project this year. We've also had meetings with the Clover Flat landfill in Calistoga to take the soil. They know how important the customer of the city is, so the consultant's working on negotiating costs for disposing the soil there, while we're also still working with Spring Mountain Vineyards on a new right-of-way access agreement with their property.
And so you anticipate the bid going out in April?
Yes.
Great. Okay, and then we'll move on to item 7.2. This is an update on the wastewater treatment plant.
Thank you. Hydroscience is our consultant for the project, received CEQA proposals, and as Mr. Rosenbrand stated, we did meet in the field. We made some adjustments to the plans. As the CEQA process moves forward, they will have to look at all the mitigating circumstances and the effects on the neighbor's property, taking in consideration the noise concerns. I'm equally concerned. It is an ag-preserve area, so we want to make sure that we're being a good neighbor. I have not seen the cost proposals yet from the consultant, but they're reviewing them. And then they also met with the USDA about the loan process and the design build. The design build process isn't allowed. Loan is allowed, but they're concerned because the USDA has never actually reviewed and approved the design build process. So our consultant's thinking, in order to meet the timeline, that maybe we just go ahead and move forward designing in-house. They're revising their scope of work to do the work under their current contract. I believe there might be some more money they need, but we can also stay on pace and get the full design by August, which I think the community and the council's concerns were of a design build. This way we'll have a performance spec with what we outline, what we need at the plant, and basically have a full design plan that goes out to bid in the standard manner.
In the August time frame?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, very good. Thank you. So we'll move on to our consent calendar. This is where members of the council or the public may ask that any items be considered individually for purposes of considering alternative action, for extended discussion, or for public comment. Unless that is done, one motion may be used to adopt all recommended actions. So I'm just going to read the numbers of the items. If anybody wants one pulled, they can let me know. 8.1.
Yes, please.
I'd like to pull that one.
8.1. Okay, that will be pulled. 8.2, 8.3, 8.4, 8.5, and that's the consent calendar. So
Wait a minute, there's an 8.6, isn't
am I
there?
seeing an 8.6?
Yes, which I would like to pull.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Can we also pull 8.4?
I'm not seeing it on mine, but we'll.
I don't have an
That was
8.6 on mine.
It's the resolution on the Stockton,
Okay.
That was not supposed to be published. That was not originally published with the agenda. So
it's on here, right? And it's on, for some reason, it's on my screen.
I don't have it on
I
mine.
don't know. I have it on mine.
The website has it erroneously, so that is not, it should not be
it
considered.
should not be there.
Okay.
It
And
was not.
Mr. Knudsen, you had one that.
Yeah, I wanted to pull 8.4, please.
So 8.1 and 8.4 will be pulled.
Oh.
And with that, then I would entertain a motion to move the rest of the consent calendar.
Could you be clear that we're talking about 8.5, 8.3, and 8.2?
Yes.
Since we don't want to have this erroneous 8.6.
Okay, so I will entertain a motion to pass the consent calendar that includes 8.2, 8.3, and 8.5.
So moved.
And a roll call, please.
So 8.6 is on the next meeting, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
I'm sorry, who made the motion?
Second.
I believe Ms. Chateau
I made the
seconded.
motion.
You made the motion. Okay.
I did.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Councilmember Chateau.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doring.
Yes.
Councilmember Koberstein.
Yes.
Knudsen.
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth.
Yes. Okay, we'll move to item 8.1, and this is Mr. Prestwich.
And I also understand Councilmember Knudsen has questions. Briefly, we did remove a reference to, in the scope of work that was published for the agenda, one of the advantages of publishing staff reports early is we receive feedback sometimes. And on item C, this was a reference to some work associated with the City Hall site that wasn't asked for, so that was removed from the scope of work. It has a 2-hour impact, so the staff has prepared an updated resolution, an updated amendment, and an updated scope of work, and that reduces the total cost by about $400.
Okay. So is there any discussion on that from the council?
Yeah, so I had a question. It was raised to me by the citizens on a street corner, because as I ride around town, people tell me what they think. And so the question was, and I can't recall, isn't our scope of work from Noll and Tam now concluded? So is this retroactive, or is this future work that we're continuing to ask them to do?
The primary work associated with this amendment is related to the consolidated new library city hall concept. So that did not have a cost estimate associated with it or rendering. So this was added to this was a request by the council, and the staff is bringing back the amendment to incorporate that work.
Thank you. I think I was on the losing end of that argument because I think I was just like, take this square footage, multiply it by the number. We don't need a rendering, but it's okay to be in the minority sometimes.
Is there any?
Well, I would just say I expect the design of the building to be different, and that there should be some cost difference. I'm hoping it'll go down a little bit, but with the consolidation, there might be some duplication of facilities that can be eliminated. So we might be surprised.
Move approval of 8.1.
Do I need to open it for public comment? I'm going to open it for,
sorry.
Yes, for public comment.
I was jumping. Still move approval.
Seeing none, I will close the public comment and we'll bring back to the council.
I'll second.
And a roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Yes.
Councilmember Koperstein?
Yes.
Shuto?
Yes.
Newton?
No.
Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes. And then we'll move to 8.4. And Mr. Knudsen pulled this.
Yeah, I'd just like to get some. It's a large dollar amount, so I'd just like to understand for the benefit of us and the citizens a little bit more about this color message board sign and trailer. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Prestwich.
So this is related to an after action report from following the October 2017 fires. It was part of the conversation in the following spring. It was a recommendation coming out of that incident that we could do a better job of messaging during emergencies. And when we think about Silverado Trail, both directions, Main Street North, Main Street South, Deer Park, we have 2, is that accurate, Erica? 2 message boards, 3 today? It's in the staff report here. And we felt that we could benefit by having additional message boards. One example was when we had a PSPS event this last spring and there was a charging center set up at the college. We were relying on A-frame signs as opposed to message boards. And we could have done a better job of directing the community to that space and having the turns, having these placed at turns. And then they say they also serve a secondary purpose of being able to help us with speed issues in town, assist with other activities that the Public Works Department's in. So its true inspiration came from our experience with the 2017 fires. And this was budgeted this year when we initially worked on the budget with the council in that workshop, I believe in May of 2019. This was brought back as a follow-up item because we had previously invested in other recommendations coming out of the 2017 fires, and this council allocated funding this year in this current budget for purchase of up to 3 of these boards.
Thank you. Is there an initial council question?
So lay out a scenario where these 3 message boards will be located if an event was to occur. Give an example of why we would need 3 as opposed to 1 or 2.
So the boards that we have today are single-sided. And so what we have today, we can place one on the entrance to town. But everyone that lives in town misses that board. We can place another on Silverado Trail, but we can only hit a single direction. And so the boards that I think we're considering are dual-sided and they're single-sided. Okay, so with 5, we have the ability to catch north and southbound traffic on both Silverado Trail and Highway 29, and then any cross section that may be occurring. And we may be, this could occur. We don't know what the scenario might be, but we may be using 1 or 2 of those boards for a public works project when the disaster occurs. And so it's just an extra resource that we can use in a lot of different ways to improve our communication.
Can somebody speak to the issue of privacy with respect to the data that's collected or potentially could be collected by these message boards? Reading the staff report, there are other purposes that could be used. I don't know if they have cameras on them or if they have the ability to get license plates or that kind of thing. I'm kind of concerned about because that's the way the world's going.
I don't believe that has the ability to get the data collection.
Car counts mostly.
Counts and speed data. Very similar to. We wanted to add that because we, as another item that was not being heard tonight, we don't have good traffic data in our town. What we have is one direction on our current radar sign. So it'd be nice to have the opportunity to get additional data collected around the city.
Are there components to the scope of this contract that can be eliminated without undermining the effectiveness of the message boards? In other words, are we going for luxury here, or can we eliminate parts of the components and still get the job done?
Yes.
I share Councilmember Knutson's concern that this is a lot of money for 3 message boards, $117,000. I understand the need, but I'm wondering if there are parts of it that are not really necessary. I don't know. It's not my area of expertise.
We did beef up the battery housing and the trailer because of the storage. Because of the long power shutoffs, we were not sure if we're going to be in a rural area where you're going to be storing that item, and you're in a shady area like Spring Mountain Road where we currently have backup power. Shade cannot maybe get the solar issue on the solar battery, so we wanted to beef the battery up a little bit more, depending on where these are deployed. So we did upgrade like the battery storage capacity and the solar panel capacity. Those could be removed. Those are options. We did cut out some of the options. There was more bells and whistles on this.
Okay.
And we cut those out, like Wi-Fi capabilities, but then that has a cellular plan you need. So.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. In cutting out.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If looking at what these additional battery storage options, if those were not part of this, what would the cost go down to? Is there a rough estimate? What
they've broken them down by elements on here. So, like the larger security battery box is $1,400 each. The standard solar battery charger is $250 each. I think that's a standard, but it was the solar battery box, and the replacing the standard solar was a 30% increase, so it increased the price by $600. So that's like $6,000 total if you add those 2 line items, or if you only wanted one that has the traffic or speed radar feedback capability. Those are all module items that could come off.
But it still stays in the $100,000 range, even if those items come up.
Yes.
So Mr. Doring, I'm looking on their website, and it looks like it's about counting vehicles by size and by speed and by time. So it's giving a lot of data. To me, I don't know how that adds to what's the value. There's sort of this. We have so much digital exhaust in our life. It's something I actually weirdly care about a lot. And this is more digital exhaust. Do we know how fast traffic goes through town? Should we know? Does it help our policing? Does it help our traffic management? We got a 2-lane in and out on Pope Street, on Pratt, on 29. I mean, we could put an intern out there to count if we needed to. It just seems like this is a lot of add-ons beyond just a message board, and so it'd be interesting for me to hear about, from our public service folks about, our public safety folks about this, if it's truly necessary or helpful.
Mr. Todd, did you have a comment?
I think just from what I've heard, I think it's helpful because we keep hearing about how speeding is an issue in town on the different roads in between, not necessarily 29 and Silverado. So I like the idea of having data to make decisions, and I see this as another way to collect the data.
My understanding is that the data collection is part of speed enforcement, and perhaps what I can do now is open it up to public comment, and perhaps Chief Hartley could come up and explain a little bit of that.
The speed data on these signs is just one aspect of it. It is extremely important to us knowing, being able to, we receive a lot of complaints in this town about speeding. And with that data, we're able to put people at various times, dependent on that data, at various locations. And it's not just Pope Street, or, we get complaints on South Crane, we get complaints on Madrona, we get complaints on Valley View. It's all over town. But if we could pinpoint cycles of where people are specifically speeding, the 1 or 2 officers I have working, I can put one there. It would help us out that way. And secondly, as far as a message board goes, we've been very fortunate during the past few fires. This past year in Santa Rosa, they learned from the first fire to regulate how they're doing their evacuations. In the town of St. Helena, if we can't regulate the evacuations and everybody gets the nixle at the same time, and you have everybody trying to get out the 2 different directions, it's not going to be good. This way, along with the high-low sirens, we can dispatch patrol vehicles to particular neighborhoods, and when the neighborhoods are evacuated, they'll have a message board to look at. If we have 3 message boards, we don't have to waste time dragging one message board to another neighborhood. And that's my biggest concern. It'd help us both out in case of an emergency and evacuation procedures, and it'll also help us out with targeting where the speeding occurs.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Is there any other public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll close the public comment, bring it back to the council. Ms. Koperstein?
I think the messaging part of this is really important. It came out loud and clear, the confusion in the community at the 2017 wildfire incident. If we purchase them with or without the traffic data, I think we need to get the word out through Shine or something of where they're going to be, and when there's an emergency, where people can find the information, maybe, so they know they can use it as a resource of what's going on. I'm indifferent about the data collection. I think that, I don't think it hurts. I think getting data both ways with a sign as opposed to one makes a lot more sense, so that you simultaneously know if cars are going one direction and the other at the same time. So I don't see an issue with this, really.
Are there any other comments?
Just that we've learned through the emergency prep work that the thing about emergencies is you never know what's going to happen, so you won't know where the signs are until the event actually happens. So the important thing is just the community to know that we have, if we go forward with this, that we have the vehicle to communicate with these messaging boards. I'm in favor of purchasing them with also the traffic information. I think that hits both safety. It makes it so that we have something to communicate for safety, and then also I like more data for the traffic and the speeding issues.
Mr. Knudsen?
So part of my interest is consent, and so if it's the consideration of the council that we should collect this data, then I'd like to have on the signs a small sign that says this message board is has a radar which is telling you how fast you're going. Because then we've actually told, because people would just look at the message board and think it's just a message board. Now we've told them, hey, we're monitoring you. We're not looking at your license plate, but this is a board that actually is also collecting information about you. And then we've, that's fair, then we've sort of essentially asked for consent from our citizens and visitors that go by the board. So why not at least let people know that that's what the board does?
Yes.
If we were collecting real private information, I could go along with that. But you drive down the road and there's a thing stretched across the road to count how many cars are going down the road. Do you tell people that you're doing that? It just doesn't seem like there's a real privacy issue here on how fast a car is going or which direction it's going in.
If I may add,
yes.
The critical element is that we're missing data on how many trucks. We estimate 10% trucks are going down Spring Street, for example, or there's 80% cars. it helps identify the vehicles when it comes to general plan studies, development studies, that we have this real-time data, that we're not actually paying extra for a consultant to do for us or an intern, and that we have that live data now, and we can compare it with what a consultant has to bring to the table with their development project. It's information we don't have now. We rely on what comes into town, or we got to pay for the traffic loops that don't give you the type of vehicle that's coming through. That's an extra person sitting on the corner, and loops have their own problems.
Well, I'm supportive of the idea, both in terms of our preparedness and also in terms of the data collection. If it's possible to put a notice on the sign letting folks know that the data is being collected, I'm not against that. But I do believe that this is an important purchase that gets us more sure-footed as we move into. We're always actually in preparedness season, so I'm in favor of moving forward. Is there a motion at this point? Unless there's other discussion.
I move that we approve 8.4 as is.
Second.
And a roll call, please.
Councilmember Chateau?
Yes.
Hoberstein?
Yes.
Knudsen?
No.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes. Okay. With that, then we have concluded our consent calendar, and we will move on now. As I said, we have public hearings. We have none, and 10.1 has been removed from the calendar, so we will move to item 10.2. This is consideration and approval of a resolution approving City of St. Helena City Council PF1, is that a PFI, dash 0018 ticket distribution policy, and this is prepared by April Mitz, our finance director.
Thank you, Mayor Ellsworth. So recently, questions have arisen from city council members regarding if the city was able to purchase tickets for them for certain community events, similar to the nonprofit policy or nonprofit benefit that is given to mid-managers and executive staff at the City of St. Helena. Once we researched this, and I worked with Kara and Kara's office on this, we currently do not have any type of policy in place for ticket distribution. So what staff did was, in order to conform with certain things within the Political Reform Act, typically, if at this point, if the city were to just give council members tickets, it would be considered a charitable gift to the council member. However, the Fair Political Practices Commission, FPPC, they have adopted regulations providing that the city may distribute tickets or passes to city officials, and that they will not be considered a gift under certain circumstances. And one of those circumstances is establishing a ticket policy. So the ticket policy in front of you tonight does list all the circumstances. It is considered part of income, but it is not reported under the FPPC as a charitable gift. There is a new mechanism through FPPC where we do have to fill out a form just stating that this is the ticket that was received, this was the value of the ticket, and it justifies what the public purpose of that ticket is. So I'd be happy to answer any questions on the policy or the staff report.
Are there any initial questions from council? No?
Is this primarily related to nonprofit events? Is that what is triggering this policy?
Correct. It would be a nonprofit event for larger cities that might have a stadium where maybe the stadium donates events. Viva Mariachi is another great event that we have in the city where potentially the city would purchase a table, and at that point we'd be able to distribute the tickets to people other than just executive and mid-managers. It would actually open it up to the council as well. There also might be some performing arts events in our city. For instance, if the Cameo donated a block of tickets, this is a mechanism for the city and the city staff to be able to distribute those tickets, and it not to be considered a gift because it would fall under this policy. And it also encompasses anything where you might be serving an official role. So maybe they're asking, let's say we have a ballpark and someone gives a ticket so the mayor can throw out the ceremonial ball. So certain things like that, it's kind of all encompassing. It definitely would encompass more than what we have currently in St. Helena, but for instance, if something were to be built later, this current policy would encompass that.
And how much staff time does it take to administer this new policy and keep track of everything that's going on?
It wouldn't actually be a lot more than what we're already doing for the mid-managers and the executive staff. At this point, I'm already tracking that information. It would be an additional form that's filled out and posted to our website.
Other council comments or questions at this point? Seeing none, I will open the public comment on this item. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to council. Is there any further discussion, any thoughts?
I'm not generally in favor of this kind of a policy, frankly, but I probably can be persuaded to compromise a little bit. It seems like some of the criteria are wide open. I would point to under the policy item number 4, 10, 11, 12. I'll read those for the public's interest. You know, some of the criteria are that we would have to meet in order to take advantage of this policy would be economic or business development purposes on behalf of the city, promotion of city tourism on a local, state, national, or worldwide scale, business retention or attraction on a local, state, national, or worldwide scale, promotion of city recognition, visibility, and or profile on a local, state, national, or worldwide scale. I would think that those are so broad that virtually any kind of a ticket would fall under those categories. My sense is that it should be used for nonprofit purposes, for local kinds of events that we support. And I would like to see a cost limit per council member. And I don't know what that number is. I would throw out $750 maybe or something in that neighborhood. Otherwise, I would strongly resist this kind of a policy. I don't know. I'm uncomfortable with it. I don't think this is why we serve on city councils. People serve on with Scouts and Rotary and all kinds of different things, and we're no different. We serve and we buy these tickets. Why are we special, I guess? And I don't know. I'd like to hear from other council members that have a different take on it. I was not one who brought this up, so I would be happy to listen to other people. But I'm resisting this because of the broad nature and the lack of a limitation on the amount of money per council member.
I'd be happy to share some thoughts. To me, I agree, the limit. I thought looking at the policy that would be similar to what staff already does, which I think is the $750 limit. I agree with it being for nonprofits. I didn't know if this was just expanding it for some reason that I don't understand yet. So I'm not sure about that. I agree that that's the purpose. What I like about it, since doing the city council as a first time, it seems that it's a position available only to somebody with a certain economic background, and there's a big expectation of time. And our time is valuable, and it serves the community when we go to these events, and we're invited to a lot of events. And so I liked it from the standpoint of being more of an equal playing field for more people in our community being able to consider city council. When you offer these kind of things, it's not an additional thing that you need to support, considering the amount of hours that we put in with the balance of what we get compensated for those hours, which I think is perhaps more than other clubs. I don't know. I just know with this that the hours are great, and I would like it in the future to be available to more people.
Thank you. Mr. Knudsen, any thoughts at this point? Okay. I'm going to open it to the public comment. Seeing no public comment, I'll bring it back. I have a few thoughts, unless there's somebody who would like to, Mary? Ms. Kupferstein?
I appreciate what you're saying, Anna. I find this a little hefty. I mean, even if it's divided among council members, it's $2,000 a person of tickets, to go places. And I myself, I just try to balance the requests that are made, and I think people understand we can't go to every event that there is. I'm a little bothered by the actual amount. I understand the idea of assisting council members, but $2,000 a person seems a little hefty to me.
My understanding was it was going to be equal to the staff of $750. Perhaps I.
Since it's $10,000,
I see.
So just to clarify a couple things, that the policy actually isn't limited to council members only. I mean, it is intended to be a citywide policy. There is no specific dollar limit within the policy. What I would suggest as a starting point is for the council to, if the council adopts it, is just to have internal tracking as to how much money is actually spent, and then perhaps to revisit it and for the council to consider something in the future if you want to evaluate how much money this is actually costing the city, and if there are changes that might need to be made on the part of, in particular, if certain council members are, basically getting more, using more tickets, etc. And the policy is intended to address both those events that the city may purchase, for example, a table at, but as well as if the city were to be gifted sort of for broad distribution tickets to an event that could be distributed not only to the city council but also to staff on a sort of random basis or whoever might want or need a ticket.
Can I ask a question or sort of propose some discussion? So one of the things, I'm not worried about this council, I'm not worried about this town, but part of giving elected or appointed officials essentially monetary equivalence is that you're sort of in a position of giving the elected and appointed officials advantages over others. I don't want to say graft, but it's weird, right? So, for example, if there were 5 people running for a council seat and the council member that was already in the seat had opportunities to put the tickets to use, whereas the 4 that were running did not, is that, I know the dollar amounts aren't large, but is that fair? So there's sort of a question to me of equitableness.
Can I ask the city attorney if there's some models from other cities that you know of that council has access to this type of?
So this ticket policy that's on your agenda tonight is very similar to others that have been adopted by cities throughout the state. There are ticket policies, if the council's interested in reviewing them, that are available online on the FPPC's website. The purposes, for the most part, as Vice Mayor Dorian said, are generally very broad to allow the city, sort of just some discretion in terms of determining that there is a public purpose in having council members or other officials and staff use the tickets or passes.
I believe that there's, we've recognized that it is important to have staff be able to attend events. I think it's important the council to keep the pulse of the community, to be able to attend events. There's an economic issue for council members spending dollars from their own pocket to attend events, sort of to represent the city. I respect Mr. Knudsen's points that it could create a disadvantage. But I do think if other cities have used a model and it seems to be working, that I would support something going forward like this that's moderate, that's not a huge benefit to any council member, but helps to offset some of the cost, particularly because of the time that is required to do these jobs. So I would be supportive of trying something like this at the current level and seeing how it works, particularly knowing that other cities have had success with it.
Bottle Rock 2020.
Well, if we think about nonprofit use,
As soon as the Warriors get back in, in stride, I want some of those too.
Yeah,
No,
it's
I'm
all
just kidding.
going to Mr. Doring. Look, I think Ms. Chateau's comments were totally apropos, and absolutely, I mean, their requirements and their government purposes. It's a funny line, though, right? And I just hope it doesn't get abused.
Well, it's all going to be reported publicly, so it's going to be on the website for everybody to be monitoring.
any other additional comments? So I would entertain a motion if we're done with the comments.
Public comments?
Oh, I did open it for public comments.
If the policy does pass, I would recommend that we eliminate references to his or her and just refer to the city official. There are ways of avoiding the use of his and her. Just for respect for a community that may have other pronouns that they use. Thank you.
I would support that.
Okay, so I move that we approve the resolution approving City of St. Helena policy PF10018 ticket distribution policy, including the changes that Paul Doring just made to pronoun reference.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
And a roll call, please.
Councilmember Chateau?
Yes.
Pepperstein?
No.
Knutson?
No.
Vice Mayor Doring?
No.
Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes. Okay. We will move on then to item, where are we here? 11.1, under new business.
By the way, before we move on, I'd be happy to. I was wishing that there was a motion that maybe took into the account some of the lines that I mentioned. We can bring this back. I'm just happy to work with somebody to revise this, limit it a little bit more, constrain it a little bit more, put a limit in. That's why I would resist it, but I'm open to looking at it in the future.
Very good.
Okay, I'd like to do that then.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to 11.1. This is discussion and direction regarding request by the St. Helena Rotary Club and Boy Scout Troop 1 to partner with the City of St. Helena to fundraise and repair the exterior of Scout Hall. And this is, I'm going to put this to our City Manager, Mr. Prestwich.
Thank you, Mayor. In late 2019, I was contacted by representatives of the Boy Scout Troop and the Rotary Club, and they expressed an interest in partnering with the city to address concerns about the deterioration of the exterior of the building. Today, the building has a tarp over the roof, and we've closed the sidewalk over the weekend due to the winds and concerns that the parapet would fall. And there are other challenges that as are outlined in the staff report. Today is really a threshold question for the council. It's an asset that was evaluated through the EMG study in late 2017. The Rotary Club and Scouts have had some independent look at the costs. Their estimates align well with the types of numbers that were anticipated from an investment standpoint over the last couple of years. It's roughly $250,000 to $300,000 we estimate. And today we have representatives of a number of clubs here to speak with the council about their interest in partnership. And so at this time, I would invite maybe our Scoutmaster, John Dodge, or John Molnar from the Rotary Club, or Kathleen Patterson to speak with the council.
John Dodge, 650 Keys Avenue, Angwin, just past Scoutmaster, as a matter of fact, former Scoutmaster, and currently Assistant Scoutmaster. Anyway, I'm going to give you a brief summary of what got us here, and then Stu Smith, amongst others, will carry from there. The troop turns 100 years old this year. It was started in the summer of 1920 and chartered to the Grace Episcopal Church. And that was 10 years after Scouting started, so it's currently the oldest troop in the county. Anyway, it was used to meet at the church. It met at a number of different buildings, and it came under the kind of the sponsorship of a number of civic organizations too. But then in 1936, Nellie Smith donated the current building, which was I believe her father-in-law's olive oil factory. He had gone back to Switzerland and the place had fallen into disuse. And she donated it to the city as a permanent site for Boy Scouts of America. And that was in 1936, so we thank the city for 84 years of support that's kept this troop running. And the troop has had a gloried history. We're going to try to produce a history volume of some type by this summer, and our hope is to have an event, public event and celebration regarding that. In 1936, they had a public celebration of the opening of it as a scout hall, and all the civic organizations were there. It's all listed, and we have a partial history of it. The Masons were there, and the Odd Fellows, and Rotary. And at that time, Rotary took over the sponsorship of the troop. So Rotary has been our sponsor for 84 years, same time that the city provided the building. Well, it got really in a state of disrepair by the late 70s, and a kind of a casual organization was formed by Gregory Hunter and Star Baldwin. Star Baldwin was the publisher of the Star at the time. Gregory Hunter was on the city council, and they did a Herculean effort, virtually tore the whole place down and rebuilt it. And what you see on the front is largely the original, although somebody donated the doorways and the windows. The rest of it went from the ground up. The building is in terrific condition, but the outside hasn't been treated in, 38 years? That would be. The roofing has worn out. It needs a roof. Paint job looks terrible. There's some deterioration of the sheeting, the exterior sheeting down at ground level, because there's some drainage issues that need to happen. So anyway, that's where we are. We currently have about 27 scouts, and the girls use the upstairs, the Girl Scouts. I don't know how many they have. I think they have about a dozen. And so it does get used on a regular basis. Any of you are willing to come by on a Wednesday night, you'll see how crazy it is. It gets a lot of use, and we really appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Stuart Smith, 1517 Sylvaner Avenue. I'm the committee chair, and like John, I'm a past scoutmaster. I think between John and I and a few other adults, there's over 100 years of adult scouting with the troop. I think I'd also like to add on to John's point, which is that most of the repairs need to be done on the outside, the siding, the frontal portion, the roof. We think, from talking to the people who've looked at it, who know what they're doing, but the bones of the thing are fine, and the inside is fine. From the inside, you wouldn't know anything was necessary. Let me also say, for Boy Scouts, I think why a lot of us are still involved with scouting is that scouting is more important today than ever. We teach leadership, community service, all of the scout oaths, all the scout laws, outdoors. We have a outing this weekend that's going up to Silver Lake to dig. It's called Snow Camp. We go up there, we dig caves. I don't think we're going to be digging caves this weekend. Not enough snow. But we have 38 adults and scouts going up on this trip, and we do an outdoor event. Not quite of this size. This is a big, important weekend for us, but we do an outing every month, and it's a way to teach young boys. They enter at 11, and they exit at 18 if they stay with us, and they go from a boy to at least weighs a man's body, and we hope to guide them in this very difficult time for a young person's growth. And we hope you look positively on this proposition, which is supported by many, if not all, of the local service organizations in town. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Prestwich, is our discussion how we're going to work together as a city with the Boy Scouts and the service clubs in coming up with an arrangement of how something like this might move forward?
It's really,
if you may, I think what we're looking for, we've all talked, we're trying to figure out a way to be a participant in this fundraising issue
we don't have the wherewithal to say we're the dog here, we're the big dog. We can do it. We don't need you. We're hoping that you can be the lead here, and we want to do what we can to raise as much money as we can. And so we need direction from you as to how to partner with you, and that's, I think,
Mr. Molnar?
and John will
Okay,
speak.
Very good.
Yes, excuse me. My name is John Molnar. I live at 3454 Sage Canyon Road in St. Helena. And I've been involved with the scouting program for 40 or so years. My wife and I have 3 sons. They're all Eagles. And as I mentioned, I've been very, very much involved with the program. Not necessarily here, but in former residences in California. The Rotary Club really has a significant interest in bringing this building up to code on the outside. I mean, it is not particularly attractive at this point in time. And what we propose is to join with the city and having some sort of a fundraiser, bringing the whole community together, as well as all of the former scouts, former Eagle Scouts, and others who would like to participate, the wineries, you name it, all of the clubs. We have support from, obviously the Rotary Club, Kiwanis Club, the Odd Fellows, Native Sons. There's a host of letters that have been developed and wish to support the project. We're not looking, those letters are not necessarily saying that we're going to give 10,000 or 20 or 30,000, but what we would like to do is to make it a community event. We would like the city to join us and hopefully do a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of the money, but we would certainly like to see this building brought up to a standard where we can be very, we can be very, very proud of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there some numbers that we're looking at so we can understand a range of what we're talking about?
Sure, and going back to your earlier question, recognizing that the council has taken the time to evaluate all of our civic assets and then prioritize our work related to those assets, and knowing that this one is one that, while important, hasn't been an active project for us over the last 18 months as we've advanced conversations related to replacement of City Hall. I wanted to be sure we took the temperature of the council regarding this request. And so that's really the question tonight, is to take your temperature on willingness to partner and invest in resources nearer term that would result in a project potentially advanced by city staff to repair and update the exterior of the building.
And that's in the range of 250 to 300,000 total is sort of the estimate?
That's correct.
So I'll bring it back to the council here, and if we want to have some discussion.
I have a couple questions. Who would actually do the work?
Well, we haven't had those conversations at this point in time. I think it's fair to say the easier approach would be to use dollars from fundraising and then go through a city process to update the building.
Okay. Yeah, I was envisioning a whole bunch of people working on a building and somebody getting injured or something like that. I don't know if the EMG report was shared with the scouts, but there were a couple of big ticket items in there that weren't listed. One of them being, I think, the electrical system, which was a pretty high number. It was like $91,000 of money. And there was some suggestion that we evaluate the structure, and that was about another $14,000. And I'm only raising these because I think if we're going to do something, we should do the guts as well as improve the outside and the roof, which clearly need work. But I mean, generally, I support the idea of people fundraising. I don't know when this would happen, in the next budget cycle or this one.
Right. From a timing standpoint, my expectation would be it would be the following fiscal year, beginning in July, which would allow us time to, when we're in the budget discussions in the spring, talk about how we accommodate a variety of CIP work.
Wow. First of all, I'm really appreciative of the Scouts. When we first moved to town, my wife actually helped run the Girl Scouts sort of kindergarten, first grade group up on the second floor. And boy, what a great introduction it was to town. And you guys have really done amazing work over the years. And I also want to commend you for your ability to sort of all the Eagle Scout projects, which are so amazing, and well, just your ability to get beyond the tragedy so many years ago. So I want to say thank you to the troop. I love, we have a history in our town of letting citizens do things on public property, right? So the Little League field is a perfect example, right, of how great, we essentially have outsourced the two ball fields and the bathroom and the snack shack and the bleachers, and we don't contribute, we don't run it, it's not our contract. I was sort of hoping that the Scout leadership that came here today was going to use that as a model and say, you know what, it's complicated going through the city, and this is a great asset for us, and guess what, we want to fundraise around that asset and sort of keep it out of the whole city, just another contract that we have to go through, et cetera, et cetera. That doesn't seem to be on the table. I'd like to see if maybe the town could come together, that really it's not a city-run project, it's really a community-developed project, and maybe we can all pitch in and take the Little League fields as an example. Find some folks that really want to participate and have been, big supporters of the Scout Hall. This hybrid stuff, to me, I don't know, it's difficult. Strikes me.
Ms. Chateau? Any other thoughts before I open it for public comment? So I'm going to open it for public comment if there's any additional public comment on this item.
Hi, good evening. My name is Hector Mariquin. I live at 1318 Mitchell Drive here in St. Helena. Work-wise, I'm a project manager for a local construction company, and I was talking to John some days ago, and this project actually came on my radar, and also my involvement with Masons here in town. It came on my project or on my radar basically because I am an alumnus of the local Scout troop here. It was and it's kind of really still is. It was still a major part of my development. So I do have a soft spot. And in hearing everything and knowing how things kind of work in terms of the construction side of things, how to deal with the city, permitting, ADA, all those things that end up happening when you start spending a certain amount of dollars, it kicks in certain requirements, state or whatever it is. So when I was talking to John, and this goes to what was being said about kind of making this more of a community thing, because the hybrid kind of private with the city, with the money gets really complicated, because when you're dealing with budgets, you're dealing with fiscal years, you're dealing with, priorities of the city and everything like that. And when it's all said and done, you still have a building that's falling down. And I was just walking by the building this afternoon and saw all the cones all over it because it's starting to fall down because of the winds and everything like that. So my point is that there is an immediate need to do something now from a logistical standpoint on what the building really truly needs is really, as everybody was talking about, siding, and I think we really need to just keep it simple. Paint, composite shingles for the roof, and siding, and then the labor associated, a painting subcontractor, a roofing subcontractor, and then possibly a framing subcontractor or a general to kind of come in to do some structural repair on the top, some framing, and then a limited amount of demo and everything. So there's a lot that can be done pretty quickly and fairly cheaply. And I think that if we want to take care of something quickly, we could probably look to some local businesses like Central Valley or anybody that's willing to donate materials. And I think if we take it from that perspective, I think we could probably work on something a lot faster and get something done a lot sooner. But then my question to the city and to the council and to the staff is that when you do something like that, right, and as a partner, how does it look with everybody else involved? How does it look, as Mary was mentioning, who's the contractor that does that? Where's the liability? Who's going to be in charge of all of that, right? What group is going to take this on? So I think it would be very, very helpful. I don't even know if it could be decided tonight on as to who does what the roles are, and what the best thing to do moving forward that can start the process off sooner rather than later. And if it takes the Rotary and the Scout leadership or whatever like that, and it's a fundraising effort at first to try to get some cash, but definitely you have to, we said 250, 300,000. May not even be that much, to be honest, especially if you can get materials donated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any additional public comment? Seeing none, I will close the public comment, bring it to council. Mr. Knutson?
We have a model. To reiterate it, we have a model we can look at, which is the way that we treat the ball fields. And clearly we have some agreement with Little League, and there's some sort of handoff. The city doesn't have liability. And they arrange the work on essentially what's public property, but it's for the public benefit. I wonder if we could look at that model and apply it to Scout Hall. I'd love to work with the Scout leadership to see if there's ways we could fundraise central, others. I don't want to rely exclusively on people donating materials, but and then it could be done, after the rain stop. It could be done now instead of waiting, through a budget cycle and on to whenever. But I don't think the city has to run this job,
Could we maybe, are there some comments you can make about this from your perspective, a public building that we own, and anything that we should be aware of as far as moving forward on some kind of joint project like this? Yep.
Sure. So there are a couple things. There are two primary models for this type of thing. One is, as the city manager mentioned, there would be a combination of private funds and city funds used to fund the project, but it would be a city project, meaning the city would be in charge of the entire thing, potentially going out to bid if necessary, doing all the work, doing all the inspections, etc. That'd be a city project. The second model is more along the lines of what Councilmember Knutson is suggesting, which would be for it to be, conversely, an entirely private project. And that would mean that the dollars would be entirely private, and the work and the responsibility for doing the project would be a private project. So the city would not be responsible for overseeing the construction, for hiring and managing the contractors, etc. It would remain a city building, but the work itself and the improvements would be done and fundraised for entirely on the private side. Where it does get tricky is when we go to truly what is more of a hybrid model, where there's a combination of both private and public money, and a potential combination of both private/volunteer labor and it being a city project, because there are a number of restrictions that we run into on the public contracting side of things that limit really the city's ability to do certain things. So it's when the city's money comes into play that there are additional restrictions that we'd have to really abide by. And that's why it's easier for it to be and simpler and more in compliance with the laws that we have to abide by for it to be either a city project, city-run project, with a potential combination of private and public funds, or an entirely private project.
Comments from the council? My thought is that I agree moving forward quickly is important. Things get worse as they get left for longer. I concur with Ms. Koberstein that looking at some of the other issues, particularly the electrical and the wiring, I would hate to see efforts put into restoring the building and then having a problem with the wiring or electrical causing other problems. Is there a way to structure a meeting with the interested parties and the city to come up with a plan for how something might work that may use the ball field model? I think also this gives us an opportunity now to come up with a plan for the future in terms of building maintenance, how we work together with the scouts so that the building doesn't fall into this state again. If this is a repeat exercise where it's fallen into disrepair before, been repaired in the 70s, and now we're back in this state, I'd like to make sure that now moving forward we have a plan that we always stay at a good maintenance level. So I guess my question would be to Mr. Presswich, is his thoughts on how to move something forward quickly that recognizes some of the limitations that our city attorney or the concerns with a hybrid program. Just a moment. I'll open it in a minute.
I want to make sure first that the staff receives clarity on the willingness of the council to want to have those conversations, and I'm speculating that the answer is yes, so I want to confirm that.
Yes.
And if the answer is yes, I did anticipate that we would need to work out details related to project scope, approach to construction, what type of an approach. Is it a city project? Is it a private project? Is it something else? And I'm expecting that it would be valuable for us to sit down with Scout leadership and the Rotary Club and others to put our minds around an approach that makes sense. To the extent the council has a preference on private versus public or a hybrid thereof, it would be helpful for me to know that before walking into that meeting.
Well, I have a basic question. The SHAPE Committee recommendation, I believe, was to essentially gift this building to the Boy Scouts for $1. And I'm wondering, is there some issue with that? I thought I heard something that you were not able to accept an asset like that. Is that the case?
If you can come up to the podium. Please come up to the podium. Yeah, thanks.
Stuart Smith again. Boy Scouts can't own anything. We're just a troop.
And yet, could there be an entity that is formed for the express purpose that is not a troop, but could hold it in perpetuity for the benefit of Scouts and Girl Scouts? I mean, this is a town that can do anything. So there could be some civic leadership that could create an entity that could accept the building for $1 for a long-term lease, ground lease. The property is still owned by the city, but the building itself is owned by this. Maybe it's a nonprofit entity that then allows the Scouts to use it. Maybe it's a 50-year lease. I don't know. Whatever it is, but wouldn't that address the SHAPE's recommendation? And given the constraints that are from the Scout side, I bet we could rustle up some civic leadership here and figure this out. I don't think it'd be too difficult. I mean, it'd be difficult, but it wouldn't be too difficult.
So as we talk about, as Mr. Prestwich brings up, finding a way to meet and discuss detail, does that sound like a path forward, knowing that there's support, and potentially Mr. Knudsen could participate in helping shape the idea of what you just talked about, an entity being formed, if that was considered the best way forward?
Does that work if we still own the land and we're ground leasing it? Does that get us out of the
Yeah, so the model
problem?
in terms of having a private project would be to enter into some type of either a ground lease or a license agreement.
And then what happens to the whole deed restriction and everything? It was given to the city to be used in perpetuity for scout purposes. So we still own it, but we're ground leasing it, so that still stays in effect.
So my thought is finding a path forward to fixing it as soon as possible, but also with a long-term plan for how it's going to be kept and maintained, so we move into a better practice with that building. Do you feel you have some direction, Mr. Prestwich?
I do, and I think we can bring you back options or an approach and a recommendation here relatively quickly.
Okay. Any other questions from council? Okay, I think we're there. Oh, Mr. Doring?
One of the questions I have, and it's not been answered or actually hasn't even been broached, is what was the deal? Who was expected and who is expected and who's obligated legally to maintain the building? And then my second concern is I don't know if there's a capacity. To raise that kind of money. I think the city needs to think about ponying up some money for a public safety point of view, and maybe it could be done in increments. Maybe it can be done with the idea that someone would match those funds. It seems like there's a little bit of an urgency, and it's going to take a while to raise $300,000. And not to denigrate these good Rotarians and Kiwanians and all these folks are working hard. I get the sense that they're coming to us for help, and I'm willing to maybe be out there and say we could match it. We're right before our budget. Everything is priorities. We have 100 priorities, hundreds of priorities, and this is an important one. I'm just worried about the urgency, and I'm worried about whether there can be some funds for maybe giving you direction to look at what absolutely has to happen right now from a public safety point of view, seeing if there's some monies that we can let loose at this point, but encouraging maybe some kind of a matching program where there's an incentive, hey, dollar for dollar or something like that. I just sense more of an urgency, and I just sense a process that will drag out for months and months and months when there's some things that may need to be done, maybe like at the $50,000 level right now. Maybe.
No, I
don't know.
I think that's an excellent idea. And I guess the question then to the city attorney is that if there's a financial joining in by the city, are we able to do that without going into a hybrid model if there's a financial matching or that kind of component? If the project is just a moment, if the project is managed by this group, if the city is participating only financially, there's no. That brings it back to.
If the city is putting its own money in, then it's basically going to be the city has a number of rules it has to comply with in terms of construction processes.
Okay, I'm going to. So I'm going to briefly reopen the public comment. Mr. Smith, if you have.
Thank you. This may bear on it, and that is that as scout leaders, the building was owned by the city, and we didn't have control over fixing it or not fixing it. And what's happened over the last 25 years is that it's slowly deteriorated. Maybe you guys thought we were supposed to do it. We thought you were supposed to do it. So there is this kind of mess. And I think that's an important way of looking at this, which is how did we get here? And I think going forward, having some resolution about taking care of the building is a good one. But we are looking at a lot of deferred maintenance, and whether that was supposed to be on us or on you. Thank you.
So I'll close the public comment, and I think this does give us an opportunity for the future. I sort of think that if the direction to the city is to look into what we can do quickly, how we can be helpful, how we can structure a working together project, or at least be supportive, to me, that seems the next step.
So I know there's enthusiasm to update the building. I also recognize that we've had some council comments related to the interior of the building as well. And I know we have a foundation issue in one room as well that could be addressed in addition to an evaluation of the electrical system. And so I think when I talk to the scouts and the clubs and the service clubs, I will explore different approaches to exterior, interior, and interior. There may be a need, and I'm anticipating that we'll be working with the Public Works Department near term to address the parapet concern and likely remove the dangerous section ourselves. And there may be a need to address roof issues near term as well. And my speculation is if we worked on some of that ourselves before any arrangement was put together, that would be something that we could do independent and still preserve the opportunity for a private partnership, advancing the other improvements that are needed. So I would anticipate providing you an update and hoping to get back here relatively quickly with a recommendation or some options.
So you're talking about basically maybe a two-phase project where we go in and do our work first, and then there's another project that comes along after?
Possibly, but I think we want to make sure that the exterior of the building is addressed because it does have dry rot issues, roof issues, parapet issues, and there are drainage issues that appear to be contributing to some of the deterioration of the siding at the lower edge of the building.
To me, that sounds like a good path, thinking a two-phase project where we as a city go in and try to get to some of the urgencies while the long-term plan is put in place. Does that feel
agree.
okay? So you feel comfortable with the direction at this point? Any other comment from council? I think we're there, Mr. I'll open it very briefly if you want to make a comment.
Just a couple of seconds. The name again is John Molnar. I just remembered that there is was a hybrid project done with the city and the Rotary Club several years ago out of Crane Park, where a building was put up for the purposes of shade for the bocce ball, and that was done with a lot of contribution from Central Valley and others with the Rotary Club. And so I just wanted to mention there's some history about hybrids. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I'll close the public comment, bring it back to council. I believe you have the direction and we can move forward. Thank you, and thank you for being here, and looking forward to working on this and getting to it as soon as possible. Thank you. Okay, now we're going to move to our next item, and this is 11.2. This is review of fire department operations and consideration of adjustments to improve readiness, including modification of one 10-hour part-time firefighter shift and increase in the fire chief's weekly paid hours of work from 16 to 30 hours. I want to thank, before we get into this, I want to thank the fire department for the continued good work and service to the community. And so I will now hand this off to Chief Sorensen.
And John, let me introduce this for us real quick, if that's okay. We had, since I've arrived about 2.5 years ago, we've had a couple of different check-ins with the council. We've done the first two of these check-ins at a special workshop offsite to take a look at the operations. It's a really fragile department. It's a department that's relied on the community for its service, and we have a remarkably successful fire department, and the efficiencies that they bring are, in my view, almost unmatched across the state and probably the country. And we continue to perform and recalibrate this department in ways that are improving service levels and containing costs. And tonight we're really taking another look at the department, partly because of our recent experience with the most recent calibration that occurred on July 1, 2019, where we added a third staff 6 days a week during fire season. But what we experienced after that was a fairly significant loss of firefighters, and we want to bring that to your attention because it creates some vulnerabilities for the department that we're trying to address. So with that, John Sorensen, our fire chief.
All right. So this is our mid-year review. This is our organizational chart. So I'm at the top there, the chief. We have an assistant chief, Adam Waters, who's here tonight. Fire Marshal Jim Capone has retired after 40 years. And that's going to be a big loss. He was 2 days a week, 16 hours. And he's now just going to say, hey, if you need me, call me. And so 1 to 2 hours, he says, but very minimal. Administrative assistant, Alec Vidler, who has gone to school and really hit the books, and now he's fire inspector. So he's moving up towards the Jim position and really helping out. He's going to take a class on plan checking. Then below we have 6 captains, and then we have engineer and firefighters. Next slide. This is types of incidents. Okay, everything is pretty flat. There's not a huge spike. Medicals are down a little bit. Canceled calls about the same. Public assists are up. This is people that need help back into bed, what have you. False alarms are up, and some of those are accidental activation from medical alarms. You know, the one dependents that be around somebody's neck and they accidentally push it. Hazardous conditions are up a little bit. Tree down, what have you. Fires are about the same, and then severe weather. Call volume, next slide. Call volume are up. We had a peak of 977, then we went down to 911, and then in 2019 we just finished up with almost right back to the 2017, which is 966. Next slide. Calls by the day of the week, pretty much the same. Wednesdays is in blue. Sorry, blue is 2018. Wednesday was almost the slowest day of the week, and then now it's the busiest day of the week. Why? Who knows? Wednesdays. Annual. Okay, next slide. Okay, here's a look at the county. Napa's on your far left at 10,000 calls. The normal. How many calls the fire department does is about 10% of the population. So if you've got 1,000 calls, you have about 10,000 people in your population. They're up and around the 80,000, 90,000, I think, is Napa now. So they're up around that 1,000. Yountville doesn't have that many, but they have the vet's home, and they probably run 3 to 5 calls a day to the vet's home. Calistoga is up a little bit. Everybody's up, and then St. Helena, we took a 6% tick up. Next slide. Here's the part-time firefighters that are available during the day. We have 2 full-time that work 6 days a week. That's Monday through Saturday, 7 in the morning till 5 p.m. So in 2019, we had 9 available, and those little dots are showing where they were. Those 3 in a row down on the bottom right, that's a left column. That's Sutter Home. We had a lot there. And then you look into the 2020 now, there's only 1. Some have moved on, retired, what have you. So we went from 9 available during the day to 5. That doesn't mean that you get 5 all the time. You could get 1, none, 2, or you could get 9 out of it's. There's no way to make it stable. So next slide. So the guideline, the NFPA guideline, the main thing here is that 4th item down, full alarm assignment at scene in 8 minutes, 90% of the time. That's the standard you want to do. All right, next slide. And this is the propagation curve. So this graph shows that there's 50% room of origin property destruction. It's the room of origin is destroyed, but the property destruction is 50% at 8 minutes. Anything past 8 minutes, you're going into, every minute that goes by, you go to 60% destruction of a property, to 70 to 80 to 90 to it's a full tear down. Some room of origins maybe just goes into the second room. They are tear downs. You just can't fix it. The smoke damage and what have you. City Hall, and that thing, we didn't even have that much. That was just contained to the furnace. All right, next slide. All right, this is showing the on scene. This is where your money. This is where it worked, and it really paid off. The red, even though the graph is showing that it's more, but that's actually, we're at scene faster, that much more of the time. We beat it everywhere, except at the very top, you'll see that under 8 minutes, it's about the same. Those are the calls that you just can't get there any faster. Those are contract calls going out to Con Dam, Con Valley, Rossi Road, up to Spring Mountain Road, or the water tender was requested to go to American Canyon, and it took 35 minutes to get there. So that's where there's no way that column's ever going to get any better. All right, next slide. All right, this is our staffing right now. In the winter months, there's Nick Salakian and Martine Macias. Nick is in red there, and Martine is in green, and they overlap 2 days a week, Wednesdays and Thursdays, and then we hire a part-timer in, and then a part-timer on Fridays and Saturdays. So it's 2 days a week. And then that black line, this is our recommendation, is to add another part-time firefighter. So it's staffing of 3. On the bottom left, you'll see the additional staffing required. Really, you cannot go to a structure fire with 2 firefighters. You need to have one on the pump panel, running the fire engine, making sure the water gets out, the water comes in from a hydrant, and there's 2 firefighters in. And they can only go in if it's a rescue. You have to have 2 more firefighters outside in order to go into any structure without a rescue. That's OSHA, NFPA standards. CPR, medical calls, those take a tremendous amount of work and documentation. Major vehicle accidents, bariatric patients, we're having more and more of those. And then the benefits is engineer training. Seems like that's what we spend most of our time doing, is just training firefighters, because we're losing them as fast as we get them. Station duties, immediate response, we're responding within a minute. It used to be 5 minutes, so that's a huge change. And then public education events, when we go do tours for the small children, the kindergartners, we teach them not to be afraid of firefighters and hide if they can hear us. We put on a mask, and we SCBA, self-contained breathing apparatus, and we get them used to what it sounds like, us crawling, looking for them in a structure fire. Well, with 2 firefighters, you have to leave that event that's at the firehouse. We say, sorry, we'll be back in a half an hour. So that's where we could, for minor calls like a public assist, we could send 2 firefighters and at least leave 1 at the station to continue.
Chief, just a little history on this slide also, because I think this is a nice representation of the changes that were implemented in July of 19. But if you took Saturday off, what we had in 2018 when we first hired the 2 full-time firefighters is they worked Monday through Friday 8 to 4, except for Thursdays, which is a training day. But we left Saturday and Sunday to volunteers, and we left all of the evenings to volunteers, and we did not staff up during fire season at all. And so the calibration in July of 19 was to overlap 2 days a week, pick up an extra hour in the morning and an extra hour in the evening, which allowed us to capture another 9% of our total call volume, which has helped add to the improvement of the response times.
Okay, and next slide. Mr. Preshwitz, this one's yours.
So one of the recommendations today is also to take a look at the fire chief's hours, and I was just doing a little math myself because John attended our staff meeting today, and he's been attending our council meeting tonight. And so between those 2 meetings alone, we've eaten up about 18.75% of his available week. Thanks, John. But there are with the full-time firefighters in a 6-day operation, we have an extraordinary value in having a chief that is paid 16 hours a week, but certainly doing a lot more because he comes to the scene in the middle of the night. We know that he's responded to over 400 calls in the past year, right, John? And there are a number of other duties, and so our recommendation today will be to augment his hours so that we can align it to a 10-hour-a-day schedule, which also provides some continuity for the firefighters if we're missing someone due to illness, vacation, etc., or an event out of the area. It allows for the chief to fill in on the engine on one of those shifts as well. And so I know we have additional slides.
Okay. Next one. Staffing changes. In the last 6 months, this is the tough part for us. In the last 6 months of 19, the fire department has decreased 36% of its firefighter staff. You can see there that 5 retired, 30-year in the department, this department, another one with 20 years, 10, 2 on personal leave right now, 2 hired full-time at Lodi. They went into the academy yesterday, got their heads shaved, and they are doing it. Hired full-time by Sassoon. We had 1 leave about 2 months ago. 1 resigned for personal reasons, and then we had a probationary separation. And then adding that Fire Marshal Jim Capone retired after 40 years. Unbelievable amount of knowledge that we lost when Jim retired. And then the increase of construction activity, we all know that is up. That's been up for quite a few years now. So, next slide.
So I'm going to just comment on this. For a while now, I've recognized the value of how affordably we deliver fire service, and this is I asked our staff to take a look at the fire department budget in some surrounding communities as a percentage of the general fund budget to just see how we compare with some of these other agencies. The cities that from essentially Fairfield higher are full-time departments, and so when I looked around the county initially, it looked like that most of the full-time departments were investing 18 to 20% of their general fund in the operation of their fire departments. And clearly that's the case with these other agencies. With Sebastopol, we followed up with them because that number's remarkably low. And we learned that they too have a volunteer fire department with a full-time chief, augmented by essentially 1 new full-time position that they're adding. They're in a transition as well. And we've determined that our numbers are still more competitive than theirs. One of the important things to know about our fire department is that our insurance service rating is a 3 on a 10-point scale, and that is a very good number because what it does is it lowers the cost of insurance for all of the residents and businesses that are served by our fire department. We didn't add this to the list here, but I would estimate that we're either higher or about the same as everyone else here. It could be possible that someone has a 2. Unlikely they have a 1.
Napa's a 2.
Okay.
I have a question. Is this the current state now or what's proposed?
This is our current budget.
Current.
Okay. Next slide. All right. Challenges.
So I think this is our continuing challenge is just maintaining a state of readiness as we calibrate this changing department. It's going to continue to evolve. What we're trying to do is address gaps, and what we've experienced at the end of November was a loss of several part-time firefighters that no longer had that 3rd slot opportunity to sign up for. Many of them, it's my understanding, were actually coming in, sleeping through the night, being available to go out. They were actually first at the engine because the other 2 firefighters that were designated to be on call that evening would respond from their house. And so it's a remarkable value to have someone available for that shift. But we recognize that more than about 80% of our calls are actually medical calls. And in having the third firefighter is part of our protocol for a medical response. And if we don't have that, we'll still run an engine, but it limits our ability in certain circumstances and the types of incidents that the firefighters respond to. So there's a modest investment in extending that. We think that by extending that third slot year-round, which extends that from 5 months to 12 months, while there's a cost to it, it enhances our readiness for both fire calls, which do occur in the other 7 months of the year, as well as medical incidents. And then from a fire chief supervision standpoint, now we've evolved from 5 days a week to 6 days a week with full-time firefighters in the station. And it's very reasonable for me to recommend, and I'm very comfortable with recommending, an increase in the fire chief's contract from 2 days a week to 8-hour days to 3 10-hour days, which would still make him a 3/4 fire chief.
Okay, and then that's our conclusion.
Thank you. Are there any initial comments from the council, questions from the council? Mr. Knudsen?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, talk a little bit about the model in Calistoga versus our model. Can you do some comparisons for us, just in terms of their operations?
Sure.
I see their budget, but
Sure.
I used to be more familiar with their operations. I'm less familiar with it now.
Right. Okay, so it's 2 full-time firefighters and 1 part-time on 24/7. Okay, so they would work a 48-96. They're on 2 days and off for 4, and it keeps rotating. So there's 6 full-times collectively, and then they have a batch, not many.
Not many.
Not many. And the depth, the thing is they only two or three live in Calistoga and get 2. Only 2 live in Calistoga to call back. So you're only good for 1 unit.
All right.
And so once they go, that's it. And if the other 2 are on shift that live in town, then there's not a lot of depth like St. Helena has. We had a triple call because of the winds yesterday, and we got 3 units out.
Okay.
Who does that? Nine firefighters.
And they have a full-time fire chief.
Yeah, full-time fire chief works in Calistoga and lives in Middletown.
Correct. Okay. I was just trying to figure out what they offer for their $1.9 million. The reason I asked it is I think we're going to have to probably get there at some point.
Oh, sure. Sure. We're trying to slow it down get there as slow.
I get that.
I know that's my marching orders, but
right.
Yeah, I'm just trying to keep the thing afloat.
What is the succession plan for you and for Chief Fire Marshal Capone? I kind of get his.
Sure.
What about your position?
I might look like I'm 60, but I'm
No.
50. And I'm not ready to go.
I like to start early. I recognize that,
Okay,
and I wasn't
I know,
intended to
I
be
know,
an insult.
Yeah.
I mean, how do we? I try to look at the position. You're a great guy. We all know you. I love you. You know, we've gone back, but I'm just looking at the position as opposed to the person, and making sure that we have people coming up who are going to be able to fill that slot. Because I think eventually it's going to be a full-time fire chief.
We'll be there.
And hopefully we can extend that out until you retire. But
Sure.
Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, we, I'd like to, if we could get somebody within that understands this department, somebody from the outside, they don't they got their ideas, they've done it before possibly, and they have their ideas of a staffing and this whole fundraising and the way this thing works and how we have, 18 part-time firefighters, and they all live in town, and this is not the norm. So getting a fire chief from within would be a great idea that would keep the idea and this model going. And the grooming process could be a couple, 2-3 years would be nice to get them dialed in before I go.
With respect to the additional 12 hours, would it be appropriate for your boss to look at those 12 hours? I'm not asking for permission. I'm just wondering. I'm not wanting to micromanage, but with that additional 12 hours, could we get some comfort that those hours are dedicated to certain things? I'm particularly concerned about oversight of your staff and recruitment. Would it be possible, or is this? I'm not wanting to offend you, but
You mean
if we get these
time?
additional 12 hours, could we break it down, say, okay, you're going to spend so many hours recruiting, so many hours. I don't know what oversight means. You can talk about that, but some of the things that you don't do now that you will be able to do, could we get some objective sort of hours devoted to? I don't know. That's more of a question for Mark, but I'd feel more comfortable if we knew what those 12 hours were in a more concise
little
way.
more, it's 16 to
It's described
30s.
here for sure, but
Yeah.
in general terms.
Well, the oversight would be, being there more. I mean, my staff is there more than twice as much as I am. I'm 16 hours and they're 40. So, I mean, I'll be there 30 and they'll be there 40, and I'll be matched up with their shifts. They'll be 10s. As recruitment, we talk about it all the time. That's all that Nick and Martine, Adam, work on is recruiting. How are we going to get more people? We have on CalOps, we have applications coming in. Not too many like last time. We had about 50, but we're working at it. We have some people in town in St. Helena that want to do. Let me back up. We have two kinds of firefighter positions. We have residential, the ones that live in town, but not necessarily have the credentials. So we train them, but they're not ready to drive a fire engine in 2 months, not even 2 years, not even 4 years. You need to be at firefighter 1 level, which is an academy. And then we have some that are firefighter 1, went to college, got their degree, and we take them and they're working the part-time shifts because all the other people have jobs and they can't work. That's why we have that model. Okay. So that's what we're doing. So we have this. We didn't know what would happen, but it worked out really well, almost too well, because almost all of them got picked up that fast in 6 months.
Okay. Is there a way to expand the recruitment program into the schools?
We visit the schools twice a year. We do the fire extinguisher training, and we always do a pitch at the end. And we do career day, and we do a pitch there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I would like to see more, but I don't know what that would look like. But that's me.
Yeah.
It just seems like that's very limited to.
I mean, some of them are off to college, so that doesn't work because I need you here. So you normally get the Napa JC, Santa Rosa JC folks. Hey, I'll tell you what, you come work for us. You got a nice job, a little part-time job while you're going to college, and we've had those, but it's not a big pool of people in this town. It's not an 80,000 person town.
Okay, thank you.
Other council questions?
Thank you for the presentation. That was really helpful. I have some further questions about sort of statistics that I'd like to see moving forward. And then I just had a couple of sort of side questions. So it looks like that on average there are 3 calls per day throughout the year. How much time is each call a typical call?
The most call is a medical call. And that can be 30 to 40 minutes, somewhere in that time. There is coming back, getting your gear washed up if it was, back in service, but about that 30, 40.
Okay, got it. Because what I'm trying to think about is sort of that overlap. So if you got 3 calls, on average 3 calls a day, and on average they take half an hour to an hour, and given presumably that they're not random, overnight probably is less number of calls than during the day. And so, but if there's 16 hours where the 3 calls are sort of randomly distributed, I'm sort of curious as to how much overlap there is between those calls.
We do get a lot. We are the king of back-to-backs.
Yeah, because I hear, it's like when I'm in my home office working and I'm hearing the siren, it seems like boom, and then so oftentimes they're...
Triple is not, we'll have a few of those a year, but doubles are very common.
Okay.
In St. Helena. I don't know why, nowhere else.
So that's where sort of my suggestion for the next one is it'd be interesting to have a heat map just in terms of the 24/7 sort of where calls are occurring, right? So it's easy. I'm sure you log everything. Mm-hmm. So it'd be very simple to sort of take that, and I can work with April to help you if need be, to throw that into a heat map or to somebody and it'd be very interesting for us to sort of take a look, just from sort of a weekly
we have all
perspective.
the data. You could process it 9 ways to Sunday.
Yeah, so we should do that simply because I think it'd be really interesting for the community.
Sure.
The other thing is the housing on Tainter, is that helpful to the Fire. Okay.
Huge. I don't even know where we would have been even 10 years ago.
And how many units are there?
4.
4. And they're they can accommodate a small family, a growing.
They almost all have families but one.
Okay. So if that has been a competitive advantage, should we think about other places to build or create that sort of dedicated housing for personnel who are working?
Well, we also have Station 2, which is a little substation
Yep.
that we have on Dowdell.
Yep.
And that one is hard to fill. We don't have any takers right now for housing.
Because it's on Dowdell.
Well, we don't allow pets,
Okay.
and that one is a combined.
Okay.
So you have 2-bedroom, 2-bath, common area.
Right.
And that is not as desirable as Tainer Street, which is a 2-1, and there's 2 duplexes,
Yeah.
4 units. So,
Got it.
yeah.
Well, I mean, if we need to, maybe we need to rethink about the Dowdell place. Maybe it could be slightly reconfigured to
Right,
make it
it's-
more appealing.
Yeah, it's personally owned by, we rent it, so we would have to talk with them.
I mean, it might-
or another location, and we move it to somewhere else.
It might be worthwhile. The other, and thank you for accommodating city staff. You've got quite a nice office, by the way. That's pretty incredible.
We do. A little jab there.
Yeah, it's pretty.
I'm in a shoe. I took all my stuff and I put it in a little box, and I just move around the fire station.
The town should, sometime, I don't know, do you ever do tours for the citizens? That office should be seen by our town because it's very cool.
Yes, Dion Karsten designed that office.
Yeah, really neat. I know that there are 2 rooms that have been considered to be sort of dormitory or overnight rooms at the station. Could those be helpful, sort of from a, because they've been empty, from my understanding, aside from the temporary staff. But could they be a sort of a useful add or not really?
It is working out right now. There is firefighters, those part-time firefighters
Yeah.
that don't live here.
Yeah.
They will come and spend the night. They don't get paid. And just because they want to get better stats and they're working first thing in the morning at 7, they don't want to do commute. So they'll come here and they'll spend the night.
Okay.
Which is an added bonus. You're not paying for it, only if they went on the call. So your call response is getting better because
Okay.
they're there.
All right, so those are being put to use in
Oh,
a
they
way
are.
that's to the benefit of the community. Okay, great.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Additional counsel? Ms. Coverstein?
I don't have a question so much as a comment. I think when we started down this road in 2018, we knew there was no going back. And every year we make a little adjustment and then we make another adjustment. And time permitting, I'd like to see more of a long-term plan of where do we think we're going to be in 5 years, so that this doesn't just come up every year as not even a regular budget item. It just comes up and it's not that it's not necessary, but I feel like we should have more of a plan in mind, and things that Paul was mentioning, succession and housing. And again, I think I would raise an issue I raised a couple of years ago. I think at some point we should look at whether we should create a fire protection district and use that to fund this operation, so that it's spread around, the community and beyond, people who are using our fire services. I'm not saying we need to do that this year, but obviously I think at some point we're going to be more in the other model where it's a bigger percent of our general fund. I just want to be prepared for it and have thought about it in advance, so it's not a emergency situation.
Thank you. Ms. Chateau?
I agree with that, and also don't want to take our eye off of the other big projects we have coming up moving forward. So I think we should do that when we can.
So I'm certainly supportive of these 2 recommendations and concur that taking a longer look, so we're being as proactive as possible. The work you do is incredible. The idea that the depth of this department that gives us a certain edge that maybe other departments don't have. There's a long tradition here of how things are done, and wanting to be respectful of that, but then continue to look for efficiencies and ways to move into the future to keep making things even stronger. I want to make sure that the department feels the support from the city so that you feel you're getting the tools to accomplish what we're asking in terms of recruitment, if it's housing, if it's what does it take to make sure that we're always in front of the issues rather than behind. So tonight, moving forward on these two recommendations, hopefully will give us some starting points to looking at the items that Mr. Doring and Ms. Koberstein brought up in terms of future planning.
I will move approval of the staff recommended action and leave it to our city manager to fine tune those additional 12 hours in terms of what that exactly would consist of.
I second.
Just want to make one last comment before we get to the roll call. Also, the idea of the fire protection district, how we work with the county and other agencies, I think is an important discussion for the future too. So I would want that to be included in how we talk about the future. So with that, I'll ask for the roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Yes.
Councilmember Shuto?
Yes.
Knudsen?
Yes.
Koberstein?
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you again for being here and presenting, and thank you for being here to the department. Okay, with that, I'm going to move now to our item 11.3. This is our quarterly grant report for fiscal year 2020, quarter two for the period ending December 31st, 2019. And Mandy Kellogg, or is Mandy's up there? Great, thank you.
All right, just waiting for the slideshow to pop up here. Sorry. All right, this presentation is highlighting grant activity for second quarter fiscal year 1920. Grants not mentioned during this presentation did not have activity during the period. So this first slide shows our newly awarded grants. We had 2 grants awarded during this quarter. The first was from Cal OES FEMA for the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, which will be used for purchasing generators and upgrading electrical panels to provide emergency backup power to essential city facilities. The total grant award was $485,392 and requires a 25% match. And this is in our budget currently. We also received a public assistance and CDAA grant from Cal OES for reimbursement of expenses related to the 2019 storms for $39,785. For pending grant applications, we did unfortunately receive notification from the Alcoholic Beverage Control that our application was not one of the 49 selected for funding, but we were invited to reapply for the current funding period. An application was submitted to Cal OES to replace generators at the water and wastewater treatment plants and also to purchase a roving generator that can be moved between essential city facilities. The total funding request was $471,000. For our active grants, contracts were awarded in December for both the removal of trees and staging, as well as prepare grading and drainage plan for the Upper York Creek project. In addition, all required reports were submitted by the required deadlines for the annual reporting. As of December 31st, the city spent $76,264 on library materials, staffing, and programming, and the city received the second disbursement from Friends and Foundation in October. The Hunt Avenue sidewalk gap closure construction was completed and will be submitting an invoice once the retention is released for that project. And during second quarter, the city received $48,120 in reimbursement for the Prop 56 grant for salaries and benefits. Due to the departure of Officer Lupian, Officer Brown has been appointed as the new school resource officer. In November, the city was awarded a PSA to Lisa Weiss Consulting for the zoning code update related to the SB2 planning grant. And so for the closed grants, 2 of the owner-occupied units were sold during second quarter, which resulted in repayments of $46,250 for the home grant. These funds have been made available to homeowners on the waiting list. And then the city also received a reimbursement for 50% of the cost of 1 bulletproof vest. For fiscal year 1920, 11% of grant funds have been requested and reimbursed as of December 31st. A few organizations are in the process of modifying their original grant proposals to the city, and we'll be reviewing those for approval. For fiscal year 2021, the application period was open at the beginning of December and will be closed on February 14th due to an extension. And the city will begin reviewing applications late February for eligibility. Any questions?
Any initial questions from council? I have a question on the FEMA grant for the generators. Do we have a timeline for when those generators will arrive?
I will have to defer that to Erica.
I'm working with someone, the consultant, to get the to review the scope of work we put together for the application to see if it's enough to move forward with going to procurement or finalizing a bid package, or if we need to do a little bit more electrical work on the project. We had, for some background, the pump station upgrades had a consultant reviewing it. Those are at 90% plans. So how much more lift do we need to do to get those out to bid later this spring so we can get those generators ordered in time?
And for this season, we think we'll have them?
That's the goal, but
Okay.
as everyone knows, everyone's looking for generators, so there's a big lead time.
Okay. Any other questions from council?
I just have a question on when we think we're going to have the time to get back to work on the conservation easement so that we can get the rest of that money that's being held.
I'm looking at Kara right now because it's in city attorney's review right now.
Okay. Okay. All right. As long as something's happening, I think we had some specific issues we wanted to look at. Great.
Okay, I'm going to open it to public comment. Seeing none, I will close the public comment, bring it back up to the council. Are there any other questions or thoughts from council? Okay.
Do we want bulletproof vests for our council members?
Hopefully we don't need them for us yet.
Thank you, Mandy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And so now we will appreciate the report, and we will move now to item 11.4. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just waiting for.
Somebody actually read.
While that's loading, I would like to say that the city has issued its second CAFR, which is in front of you. It is also available on our website. Oh, sorry.
Okay, so we're going to move on now to item 11.4, and this is presentation of the fiscal year 2019 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, the CAFR, CAFR, and Independent Auditor's Report on Internal Control over Financial Reporting. And again, Mandy Kellogg.
Great. State law requires local governments to publish a complete set of audited financial statements. VLF completed the annual audited financial statements for St. Helena for the year ended June 30th, 2019. And the city's comprehensive annual financial report, or CAFR, consists of three sections: the introductory section, the financial section, and the statistical section. The following slide shows a comparison between fiscal year 17-18 and 18-19. Throughout the slides, the darker bars on the left are 18-19, and the lighter bars on the right are 17-18. The first slide shows a comparison of the net position for all funds. The net position at the end of 18-19 was $68.2 million, an increase of $5.4 million from 17-18. Business type activities, which is water and wastewater, increased $2.1 million, and governmental activities increased by $3.3 million. This next chart shows a comparison for all funds of revenues and expenses for fiscal year 17-18 to fiscal year 18-19. Revenues increased overall by 1.1% to $30.6 million, and expenses increased overall by 8.8% to $23.9 million. When comparing governmental activity revenues, which is primarily general fund, from 17-18 to 18-19, overall revenues decreased by 5.8% to $20 million. The decrease was primarily due to a receipt of a final Measure A payment in fiscal year 17-18. Overall general revenues, which primarily consist of property tax, sales tax, and transient occupancy tax, increased by 17.67% when compared to the prior year. When comparing governmental activity expenses from 1718 to 1819, expenses increased by 15.6% to $15.5 million. The increase was primarily due to public safety salary expenses related to the addition of 2 full-time firefighters, increasing the fire chief's hours by 1 additional day, and increased salaries in the police department due to vacancies from FY 17-18 that were filled in FY 18-19, and increases in public works for capital improvement projects related to the ADA transition, civic capital, and street capital. This chart shows a comparison of the governmental fund balances from FY 17-18 to FY 18-19. The general fund balances on the left side of the chart, and that is reported on page 17 in the CAFR, includes funds 101, 280, 283, 286, 287, 289, and 593. This balance increased to $9.2 million as of June 30th, 2019. The general fund balance shown in the center of the chart is Fund 101 only. The balance increased to $8.4 million as of June 30th, 2019. The non-major fund balances on the right side of the chart increased 11.8% to $18.3 million as of June 30th, 2019. This chart shows a comparison of the general fund budgeted amounts to actual amounts for FY 18-19. The blue bar is the budget amounts and the green bar is the actual amounts. General fund revenues exceeded budgeted estimates by $1.3 million. General fund adopted expenditures were more than actual expenditures by $0.9 million. This chart shows the business type activities from fiscal year 17-18 to 18-19. Revenues decreased by 17.19% to $10.6 million. They increased. And this was primarily due to a utility rate increase implemented in November 2018 and a one-time settlement associated with consultant wastewater fund analysis. Expenses decreased by 1.7% to $8.4 million. The decrease was primarily due to staffing vacancies and a decrease in depreciation. At the end of fiscal year 2019, the city had invested $50.6 million in a broad range of capital assets. This is a net decrease of $1.3 million, or 2.5% from fiscal year 17-18, which is primarily removal of old assets that were no longer in use and depreciation. At the end of fiscal year 18-19, governmental activities has $9.6 million long-term debt liabilities, and business type activities has $16 million long-term debt liabilities. The overall debt decreased 18.47% from the prior year, which was due to a payment of $5 million toward the balance of the state revolving loan with pledged Measure A sales tax revenue. The city refunded the 2006 A water bonds and issued a private placement through J.P. Morgan Chase, which will result in an overall savings of approximately $750,000 over the term of the loan. This is the report on internal over financial reporting, which identifies deficiencies and internal controls that the auditors considers to be material weaknesses, significant deficiencies, and identifies areas where the city was not compliant. The slide shows a summary of the auditor's report for the last 5 audited fiscal years. The left side shows findings identified per fiscal year. The middle gives a description of the findings, and the far right shows the status. We're excited to report that there were no findings to report in fiscal year 18-19. And I would also like to add that we did submit both the CAFR and the PAFR for an award this year.
Thank you very much. Any council comment, question at this point? Ms. Shuto?
No, just that's great that there was no findings. What a success. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other council comment, questions? Mr. Knudsen?
This is a really good report.
Thank you.
So, Ms. Kellogg, Ms. Mitz, Mr. Presswich, good job, because it's clear. It's really clear. It's not too much. Thank you.
We continue to have a trend of less general sales tax. Is that what you're finding for the general retail category?
I don't think we did this year.
Over the last many years, it seems to be trending downward slightly, very slowly, but slightly downward.
It's not downward. It's still a little bit of an upward trail, but it definitely is slowing a little bit comparatively. I'm actually putting together some spreadsheets for Mark that were some graphs that we're looking at that right now because we're differentiating between the Measure D, the half cent, and then the regular sales tax.
Okay.
We've been slowly still increasing, but not as drastic as we had.
Okay. I thought I saw a downward trend, but they're very close for the last couple of years. Shout out to Oliver Caldwell, who's made the top 25 in, apparently, in sales tax contributions to the city of St. Helena. Must have sold a few very big paintings. But anyway, thank you.
So I will open it up for public comment. Seeing none, I will close public comment. Thank you very much. I would like to thank the Finance Department and Mr. Presswich. This is remarkable, and the fact that we've moved from an area in the past where there were findings to a time now where there are not. I commend our staff. It's really appreciated. The fact that we also have the popular annual financial report. Our citizens should know about that they can access that on the webpage, and that is a clearer way to look at the city's finances, and I think it's important for our citizens to know that they have access to this. So thank you very much for this work. Okay. With that, we will move on now to item 11.5. That's review of fiscal year 2020 to 2021 budget preparation calendar, and this is Ms. Mitz, our finance director.
Thank you, Mayor Ellsworth. So in the packet tonight, there was an overview of what our budget calendar will look like. So you can see everything in there from when the grant applications for nonprofits went out. You have the due dates on there. There's also several planned meeting dates. So we wanted to make everybody aware of that. We are 1 week delayed in getting the finance department issuing the instructions and the budget worksheets. Initially, we did anticipate that would be done by last Friday. However, due to a family emergency on my part, I haven't been able to do that portion of it. So the important dates to kind of make note of, as Mandy had mentioned earlier, this Friday is the deadline for the nonprofit grant applications, and that is the extension. The grant manager, so Mandy, will review the nonprofit applications for eligibility. Concurrently, at the same time, department heads will be submitting your budget worksheets. The nonprofit grant applications will be given to the City Council Working Group, as we did last year. The meeting that we are looking at having the nonprofit summaries presented to the City Council will be March 24th. And then the other two meetings that we're really looking at is, and also to make council and the public aware, is that the first budget session is scheduled for May 14th from 9 a.m. to noon. And if a secondary one needs to be scheduled, it would be scheduled on May 14th. So I'm sorry, May 21st. You're correct. I put the wrong date on there. Those are the two dates, so we'll send calendar invites.
Okay, so are there any council questions, thoughts? Seeing none, I will open it to public comment. Seeing none, I will close public comment, bring it back to the council. Any final thoughts? And seeing none, I will adjourn the meeting. I appreciate everybody's time and focus. Thank you. Thank you.